Good evening. It's Zion El today, Tafshin Pei Hey, and I want to thank everyone who's mishtatif, close the door please, who's mishtatif in the shir, and I want to give a special yasher koyach to the Gideon Grazianian family, to our Rav Shimel for setting it up, and a very special yasher koyach to Mayor Goldenberg for organizing the shiurim and making sure that it's put out in the public. Ashrei chelkechem v'godel zechuschem. So we spoke a lot about the Alter Rebbe coming out of prison and getting stuck by the Misnagid's house. So according to what I read, it is Reb Note Notkin was the name of this Misnagid. He was a wealthy person. Obviously, if he lived in Petersburg, he was a wealthy person. And he was from the top Misnagdim who caused the Alter Rebbe to go to prison. So he was a very big opposer of Chassidim, a very big Misnagid in other words. So when the Alter Rebbe came out of there, we know that the Mordechai of Leple, who was upstairs, and they knew that the Alter Rebbe was supposed to come out because the last so many days, the ministers that were involved in the government, they were very close to Mordechai of Lepler. Mordechai Lepler was a Chassid that was a very big businessman. He was connected to a lot of his ministers. And they kept on informing Mordechai all the time, everything that's going on with Alter Rebbe. And already a few days before, I think it was already Friday, which was Tezvov Kislev, they already told Mordechai the news that this is it, he's coming out this coming week, because the Senate is about to finalize it, and they found him to be innocent and a tzaddik and so on. So when they saw that Alter Rebbe still didn't come, they got very scared, and they went downstairs in order to find. They knew Reb Note Notkin is a big misnagid and doesn't like the Chassidim, but still he'll tell them, he'll boast to them if the Alter Rebbe Chas v'Sholom is stuck for more time. So when they came down, they overheard behind the door was locked, and they overheard him scream against the Baal Shem Tov and against the Mizrach Magid, so they understood Alter Rebbe is stuck there. They banged the door down, they were knocking on the door, and this Misnagid said, "What are you screaming? Here's your Rebbe." And then Mordechai wanted to hit him, but Alter Rebbe showed him in a remez not to touch him, chas v'sholom. L'poel, the Alter Rebbe came out, and he told Mordechai Lepler, "Hechi sonny, you like brought me back to life by taking him out from the Misnagid's house." These, what?
You said the part of the villager? That's the best part.
Yeah, it doesn't say it anywhere. I heard that story, but I don't know how reliable it is. L'poel, when the Alter Rebbe came out, the next day, that night, Chof Kislev, the next day was Wednesday, and the Chassidim became so happy, and hundreds of Chassidim came to Petersburg, and they were making cartwheels in the streets of Petersburg. Chassidim. At first, Alter Rebbe was nervous. I saw somewhere written that the Alter Rebbe was sort of worried about the Chassidim starting up with the Misnagdim and telling them, we won, and so on, teasing them. L'poel, the Chassidim were very much in control of themselves. They did not start up with the Misnagdim, they did not tease them, so the Alter Rebbe became very happy about it. So much so that the Alter Rebbe said the next day to the Chassidim, he said like this, in Sheishes Yemei Breishis, in Chumash Breishis, it says, Bayoim HaRevi Nitlu HaMa'oros. Nitlu is there with a tuf, and it means it was hung in the sky. The Eibishter hung the sun and the moon in the sky, the luminaries, right? However, the word Ma'oros in the Torah, sometimes you have a word that's a chaser and sometimes it's a mali. Ma'oros, usually a mali is with a vav, with a cholam. But in that case, in Chumash Breishis, Ma'oros is without a vav. And the Ramban explains why is that so? Because the Eibishter kept the bright light of the Ma'oros. The way he created them was so bright and so special, he only kept them for 3 days. And after 3 days, he hid it. That's why we say by Kiddush Levana that when Mashiach will come, the Levana will be shining like the sun, and so on and so forth. The Eibishter hid it for the times of Mashiach. So the Alter Rebbe explained as follows. He said that the Ma'oros lasted 3 days. The Alter Rebbe said it's 3 generations. the generation of the Baal Shem Tov, the generation of the Mezritcher Magid. Alter Rebbe didn't continue. That he's the third generation. He didn't continue. Then the Alter Rebbe said, "Vayomer Revi nitlu hamoiros," with a tes, because the Mezritcher Magid in Tov Kuf Lamed Gimel years before was nostalgic on a Wednesday, Yutes Kislev. Now Yutes Kislev was on a Tuesday. Said the Alter Rebbe, now and the same day nitlu hamoiros with a tov. It was hung up, meaning the day the Alter Rebbe came out of prison. And then the Alter Rebbe concluded and said, now it's all dependent on you, Chassidim, how you're going to devote yourself to the teaching of Chassidus and to the publicizing of Chassidus. It's all depending on you. The connection of the Mezritcher Magid to the Alter Rebbe in this case is very powerful. We know that the Mezritcher Magid called in the Alter Rebbe either the day before he passed away or something like that, and he told the Alter Rebbe, today is our celebration. This is years and years before. And Alter Rebbe came out on the day of the Yahrzeit of the Mezritcher Magid. Soon we'll understand a little bit more about it. Wait, we'll get to that in Mitzvah Shem. The Alter Rebbe, when he came out, so the next day, I guess, it was Chof Kislev. So hundreds of Chassidim came, and it was very, very freilich. And the Alter Rebbe informed the Chassidim, I'm not going to be saying Chassidus today. A Maimer on Chof Kislev. Two Yidden pushed through the crowd and screamed out to the Alter Rebbe and said, Rebbe, in Russia we have turned far away from, I guess, Yiddishkeit. But the Eibishter is our witness that now we try to fulfill everything that's written in the Torah. Rebbe, say something to warm up our hearts. And Alter Rebbe became excited about this, and this caused him, so to speak, to say a maimer. Alter Rebbe came out to the chotzer, to a yard outside. Yutas is Chof Kislev. Chof Kislev, this is Russia, middle of the winter, and this is Petersburg. Petersburg is not just Russia, but northern Russia, and therefore it's even colder over there. So it was very cold outside, and the Alter Rebbe said a maimer to all the people because of these two Yidden. And the Frierdiker Rebbe describes and says, even though it was very cold, the hearts became warmed up and inflamed, and the whole body, all the bodies became warmed up. Everybody became warmed up. B'chol ha'yivarim, in all their limbs. That was on Chof Kislev, with Alter Rebbe said a maimer because of these two Jews. When the Alter Rebbe came out of prison, he, after a while, and there's a lot of details to talk about, but the Chassidim decided they want to make a Megillas Yutas Kislev. How? It was big Chassidim. These were Gedolei Yisrael, these Chassidim. Isaac Humler and so on. And they decided they're going to make a Megillas Yutas Kislev, mamish like Megillas Purim, Megillas Esther. I guess with a bracha and write it on parchment, v'chul v'chul. And these Chassidim were Gedolei Yisrael, they were Ge'onim. They knew all the halachas and everything else. And they all set it up, meaning to say they all had it all set up in their minds on how to do it. All they needed was permission from the Alter Rebbe. So that summer, seemingly, this is winter, that summer they came to Lyozne, a group of Chassidim, they kept it a secret, nobody knew about it. They came a group of Chassidim, and they presented the Alter Rebbe their suggestion of making a Megillas Yutas Kislev. The Alter Rebbe said no. He did not allow them, did not give them permission. However, the Alter Rebbe said, this day of Yutas Kislev is going to be set up as a Yiddish Yontif forever, and on this day it's going to be Yizgadal, Yizkadash, Shmei Rabo, which means the Eibishter's name will become great and holy and so on and so forth. And the Alter Rebbe concluded and said, thousands and tens of thousands of Yiddish hearts will be awakened to return to the Eibishter and to serve the Eibishter, because this is all ingrained and engraved in the Yiddish hearts. The day of Yutas Kislev. Basically, the Alter Rebbe said, you don't need a Megillah because this will be an automatic yontif for the Yidden. Or maybe even, in my humble opinion, maybe the Alter Rebbe was trying to say it's going to be even higher than just a Megillah, the Megillah says that. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that after Yutas Kislev, in the years to come, Reb Nochem, who was the son of the Mittler Rebbe and grandson of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Nachum had a custom that every year, Yitas Kislev, he would sit down by a Fabrengen, Reb Nachum, after they started Alter Rebbe, I'm not sure. He would sit down by Fabrengen and start saying the story of Yitas Kislev from the beginning to the end. Just like we read a Megillah, but just in his own words. And the way he used to tell the story, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, was he started these words. He says, the Zayde was for 10 years a Talmud of the Magid of Mezrich. And for 5 years he was the head of the Chavraya Kadisha. And then he became known as the Magid of Liozne, and he started guiding people to Chassidus, to learn Chassidus. And for 20 years, my Zayde, the Alter Rebbe, worked very hard on setting up those 3 Chadorim in Liozne, and to guide the Chassidim to become Chassidim. And he worked very hard, the Alter Rebbe, to publicize and explain the teachings of the Mezritcher Magid and the Baal Shem Tov. And the Alter Rebbe took all this hardship upon himself. There was a lot of Talmidim of the Mezritcher Magid, but the Alter Rebbe took everything, all the hardship on himself. And not only was it hard for the Alter Rebbe, because to publicize the teachings of the Mezritcher Magid, but it was even harder because the Alter Rebbe was close to Lithuania. Lithuania was the place of the place of all the base of all the Misnagid Sheyidin. And when the Tanya, the Kuntreisim, became publicized, said Reb Nachum, by this Fabrengen of Yitas Kislev every year, and people, thousands of people, were following the Alter Rebbe and following the Alter Rebbe's tikkunim. The Alter Rebbe changed certain things in Jewish life. For instance, the Alter Rebbe set up the mikvahs. He changed the ideas of a mikvah to become better. Warm mikvahs and so on.
In the case on
Yeah.
Yeah. They found the mikvahs that are in Yerushalayim underground from the olden days. So the guy who gives the tour says that this is a mikvah of Chabad. But that was revealed by the Rebbe Rashab. But the Alter Rebbe made a change that they made warm mikvahs. And also the sakinim, the shchita knives, for shchita, for kosher shchita, the Alter Rebbe changed the whole system of how it was sharpened, and so on. And then said Reb Nachum in his talk about the Alter Rebbe, about Yitzchak Kislev, came the Masira, the false accusation against the Alter Rebbe. Reb Nachum used to say the story with all the details, but short and very concise, very clear. And every time he came to the story and he told about the Alter Rebbe being in prison, he would say it in a crying and quiet voice, just like, in the Megillah when we lower our voice by Shushan Avoicha, and so on and so forth. And as soon as he came to the Geula part of the Alter Rebbe, his voice was raised and it was happy. And he read it mamish like the Megillah. In what way? At night of Yitas Kislev, and then again in the morning he would say over the whole story again. And if somebody would come towards the beginning of the story from the honorable Chassidim, some Chabadim, he would start the story all over again for them to hear it. It is interesting, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, that, or in Beis Rebbe says, that in a sefer called Shailis or Tshuvos Min HaShamayim, which was written by someone from the early, maybe from the Rishonim, the reason why he was from the Rishonim, he passed away before the year Hey Alofim. It was still Daled Alofim, towards the end of Daled Alofim, which means from now it's already 785 years already. So he wrote the Sefer, someone wrote the Sefer, and he writes there, one of the entries, this person was a great person, he used to ask Shilas from heaven and he used to give him answers. And he writes there in the Sefer all the Shilas and Truvas. And then one of them, I think Simon Hay, he writes, Sha'alti, I asked a question, Leil Gimel, on Tuesday night, Yitas Kislev. And they answered so and so, and they answered, but in the answer he writes, Hayoim Yoim Besura. Today is a day of special news, of good news. And there's no connection of the word Yoim Besura to the rest of the answer. It just says those words, Hayoim Yoim Besura. And in this Sefer that he wrote, nowhere does it has places with the name of the month that he wrote it and so on, or even the date of the month, but not the day of the week. Yoim Gimel Yitas Kislev Hayoim Yoim Besura. That They don't have. That he doesn't have anywhere. In order to understand a little bit before we continue on, how serious it was, the imprisonment of the Alter Rebbe, and how intense, and how the Chassidim took it, and how the Chassidim felt in those days. So I'll give 3 little stories of how Chassidim took the imprisonment of the Alter Rebbe. So we can, from then, we can understand how serious it was, and then we can understand the simcha after that, and the rest of the details. Story number 1 is that there was a certain Chassid called Rebbe Mendel Yitzchak. The Frierdiker Rebbe says the story. And he told over that his grandfather, the Mendel Yitzchak Zayde, was called Rabbi Cheskel from the city of Starodov. Starodov is a famous city in Russia with a lot of Chassidim there and a lot of interesting stories that happened there. So he was from the city of Starodov, and he was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, this Rebbe Yecheskel. And once every 2 years, he used to walk from Starodov to Lyozne by foot. He didn't take a wagon. He used to walk to the Alter Rebbe once every 2 years. When in Starodov, remember, in all these places besides Lyozne and then Petersburg, all the news was found out not in the same day. There was no electronic system in those days, so the mail, the FedEx had to arrive. So it took time. So when they found out in Starodov that Alter Rebbe was in prison, and not only that, but they took him with the black coach, which means capital punishment, which means the death penalty, God forbid. So Rabbi Yecheskel in Starodov, who was a makusha to the Alter Rebbe, gathered the Chassidim in his community. He was a very special person. And he told them in no unconditional terms, he told them no ifs, ands, or buts. He told them that he accepted upon himself that he is going to accept all the suffering of the Alter Rebbe. You hear this? Give me a second. He's going to accept all the suffering of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Yecheskel of Starodov. And all the way, he said, to the ultimate suffering, Chas v'Shalom, to pass away. This Rabbi Yecheskel, after he said it, he announced it to his friends, the Chassidim, sat down and started a fast, and he fasted for 3 days and 3 nights. For 3 days, he didn't eat nothing, not even break his fast at night. On the 3rd day, he davened mincha calmly, and then called his chaverim, his friends, the Chassidim, and he informed them that in a few hours from now, he said, he's going to Gan Eden. Why? Because in heaven they accepted his exchange and his request to exchange the Alter Rebbe and all the suffering. He told the Chassidim, his friends, bring mashke, and he said l'chaim, and then he told them these words. This is in the beginning of the Alter Rebbe's prison. He said, when the Psura Tova, the good news will arrive that the Alter Rebbe was freed from prison, they should go to his caver and say l'chaim and dance next to his caver on the day of Yitzchak, on the day of the freedom of the Alter Rebbe. After that, this Chassid calmly said vidui and went to Gan Eden. Tuesday morning, Yutes Kislev, when the older Chassidim that were his friends, a whole group of Chassidim, arrived to daven Shachritz in Shul, this is Starodov, and the Alter Rebbe is in Petersburg. They did not know what's going on in Petersburg. They just knew the Alter Rebbe is in prison. They arrived in Shul on Tuesday morning, Yutes Kislev, in Starodov. All these older Chassidim looked at each other, waiting for the other one to spill the beans and say what they want to say. They all had something to say, but nobody wanted to be the first to say it. In the end, somebody spilled the beans and said that Rabbi Cheskel, this Chassid who passed away 50-something days ago, came to him in his dream. And all of them said, yes, that's what happened to every single one of them. That night, Rabbi Cheskel came to every one of his friends in their dream. And he told them that at midnight, the Baal HaHilula, the Mezritcher Magid from the Yortzeit of Yutes Kislev announced that on this day, the Rebbe is coming out of prison with great honor, with great coverage for him and for all of his Chassidim. And Rabbi Cheskel in the dream demanded from his friend to keep the shvuah, to keep the promise that they swore to him, and to go to his kever when they find out the news, to say l'chaim and go dancing. The next story is also something to do with the Mezritcha Magid, and it was Kislev, because the Mezritcha Magid, I told you, was a Histalkus. There was a Chassid, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, called Reb Mishulam Yaakov of Chashnik, and he was in Lyozne, and on Yutas Kislev, seemingly by Mincha, seemingly, from the story, he went over to Amid to be the Chazan to daven by the Amid. They didn't know the Alter Rebbe is out of prison, or is coming out of prison. They're in Lyozne. The family, the Alter Rebbe, is in Lyozne. Remember, nobody left Lyozne, because Alter Rebbe said, except for Yisrael Kozik, Rabbi Yisrael Kozik, and another person, nobody should go. So this Mishulam Yaakov went over to the Amid. Seemingly he was there when the story happened, so he told it over, most probably. Mincha Yutas Kislev. Again, I think it was Mincha. And the Mittler Rebbe suddenly saw the Mezritcha Magid. At that moment, or before that, don't have no clarity. And the Mezritcha Magid told the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, these words: the Nossi, it's the Rebbe, your father, has already come out of prison. He still now has some suffering, some Yisurim, but this will also, Gamzei Yavor, this will also pass by very soon. He was at the home of the Misnagid at that time, the Alter Rebbe. That's what he told the Mittler Rebbe. That's another story. Another story now, which happened, is a very interesting story that the Frierdiker Rebbe told over. There was an old Chassid called Rabbi Yisrael Yitzchok. An old Chassid. How old was he? That even though he was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe now, but he was still a Chassid of Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, the Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, the Reb Mendel Horodoker, that we call Horodoker. And now the Reb Mendel Horodoker went to Eretz Yisrael, so now he's a Chassid already for years from the Alter Rebbe. He was in Lyozne, Simchas Teire, Tovkuf Nun Tes, when they arrested the Alter Rebbe, Isru Chag. He was there, Isru Chag, and he was standing outside of the Alter Rebbe's house. When? Maybe the next morning, Thursday morning, whatever it was, or Thursday evening, whenever they arrested the Alter Rebbe, he was standing there with lots of Chassidim, with people standing and milling around the house, and they knew that there's trouble happening. They saw the black coach arrive, and they saw armed soldiers go in and out of the Alter Rebbe's house, and they're going to arrest the Alter Rebbe. And the Chassidim understood that they're arresting the Alter Rebbe, but they also understood that the black coach is not good news. Because the black coach in Russia in those days was known that the guy who goes with the black coach does not come back alive. Chas v'sholom. So the Chassid, Rabbi Yisrael Yitzchok, got very, very agitated. He got so nisragish, he started screaming, Oy vey, shchinte begalusa. What's the pshat shchinte begalusa? The Yidden are in Golus, it says, the Eibishter is with them in Golus, shchinte begalusa. When a tzaddik is doch very, the Gettlichkeit is always in the tzaddik, or within the tzaddik, or next to the tzaddik. So when a tzaddik, something happens to him, it's actually happening to Gettlichkeit. So when Rabbi Yisrael Yitzchak saw that Alter Rebbe is going into Golus, he's going into prison, he screamed out, Shchinte begalusa. And then, right after he screamed out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and he fell into a very deep faint. The Chassidim tried to wake him up, didn't help. Meantime, the soldiers took the Alter Rebbe in the coach and they left. And he's still in a faint. He's still in a coma-like. And they tried everything, they couldn't wake him up. So somebody started screaming in his ear, the Alter Rebbe is free, the Alter Rebbe is free. He said it over and over and over again until suddenly they saw color coming back into his face. He was very pale. The red color coming back to his face, and he woke up. And they didn't tell him the truth that the Alter Rebbe is actually in prison. Took him a while, I don't know, hours or days, doesn't say, but soon enough he found out the Alter Rebbe is still in prison, and he was in very big pain. When the Frierdiker Rebbe told over this story, his maskir, his secretary, who was called Reb Chache Fegin, Rabbi Cheskel Fegin, Hashem Yikum Domoy, he was unfortunately murdered by the Nazis, burnt alive by the Nazis, and he was with the Frierdiker Rebbe till World War II. Till the beginning of World War II, the Frierdiker Rebbe then came to America. So this Reb Chache Fegin, when he heard the story of the Frierdiker Rebbe, he asked the Frierdiker Rebbe a shaila. Why didn't this chassid faint again when he figured out that Alter Rebbe is still in prison?
Yep.
So So the Frierdiker Rebbe told him, the second time you don't faint. The pain, said the Frierdiker Rebbe, the tsar, was the same. But the zazua, the shock, the helem, is only once. When a person, chas v'sholom, gets so shocked, like this chassid did, he fainted. But the second time it wasn't such a shock, but it was still the same pain, he said. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe said. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Chassidim decided to fast every Monday and Thursday that the Alter Rebbe is in prison. However, there was some Chassidim that was not enough for them. They decided they're fasting every single day, and they'll break their fast at night, in the evening. Here's this Chassid, Rabbi Yisrael Yitzchak. How old was he? He was a Chassid of Mendel Vitebsk. So he was an older year. He decided, no, he's fasting every single day. He was so mekushan, he had such love to the Alter Rebbe, he couldn't get himself to not fast every day. In his city, he went home to his city, and in his city, every day, the group of Chassidim that fasted every day, and also those who fasted Monday and Thursday, would get together at night after Mincha Ma'ariv and break their fast. And they would sit down and fabring to strengthen each other. They would fabring, encourage each other, and say Divrei Idud and Chassidus, whatever it was, every night. It was Chai Kislev, Yud Ches Kislev. In the evening, they sat down, Yud Ches, and they sat down to break their fast and to fabring. And we saw Yitzchak was amongst them, and he was very tired. Older year, fasting. So he fell asleep right there in shul on the bench, on the table. Suddenly, he sees his Rebbe. He fell asleep. He sees his Rebbe, Reb Mendel Vitebsk, his first Rebbe. And Reb Mendel tells him these words, says the Frierdiker Rebbe. Ich weiß, dass du bist nicht mein Chassid. I know that today you are not my Chassid, but you are a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. But since once upon a time you were my Chassid, I will therefore reveal to you what's going on in heaven. And he tells him that this evening was the yahrzeit of the Mezritcha Magid, says the Mendel Vitebsk. And on the day of the yahrzeit, the tzaddik sits in his heichal, in his chamber in Gan Eden, and he says Divrei Torah and reveals soidos, secrets, and all other tzaddikim, many tzaddikim come to his heichal to listen to him. So this evening, said Reb Mendel Vitebsk to Reb Yisrael Yitzchak, the Mezritcha Magid was sitting there, the Baal Shem Tov was on his right, and the Arizal, Reb Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal was on his left. And then Reb Mendel Vitebsk told Reb Yisrael Yitzchak in his dream names of many other neshamas that participated in this fabrengen up the Lamayla. After the Mezritcha Magid finished his Divrei Torah, suddenly he burst out crying and screamed out, my Talmid, Zalmanu, is sitting in prison, and Chassidus is in danger. And he begged people, the neshamas, whatever, should do something to help the Alter Rebbe. Suddenly, says Reb Mendel Vitebsk, in walked Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, 2,000 years before, and set up a bezdin right then and there, and they paskened that the Alter Rebbe must go out free. The Chassid Rabbi Yisrael Yitzchak woke up and immediately told all his friends what he just dreamt. And Chotch Afilu, even though a dream sometimes could be stam baba maises, as it says in the Gemara, Chaloimois shov yidaberu. But on the other hand, such a dream, not only that, but they said since he saw his Rebbe, seeing a Rebbe in a dream makes the dream serious. Seeing a Rebbe in a dream is a different level. So therefore, for sure, this dream is a serious dream, they said. And so, they made a decision right then and there. As long as we didn't hear Begashmis, the news, because it takes time to arrive, we're going to continue to fast, but this time it will be done b'simcha. Someone told me that he heard that they stopped saying Tachnu after that dream. I don't know if it's true or not. And they continued fasting, but b'simcha. 5 days later, after Yitas Kislev, which is Erev Chanukah, the FedEx arrived finally. They got the mail that the Alter Rebbe came out to freedom on Yitas Kislev. So this we see how the Mezritcha Magid, his yahrzeit to Yitas Kislev, how connected it was to the Alter Rebbe's release of prison. After the Alter Rebbe came out of prison, so it became a new saying amongst Chassidic Chabad. The new saying, it's famous until today, was Far Petersburg and Noch Petersburg. Meaning before Petersburg, before the Alter Rebbe went to prison, and after he came out free. What was the difference? That before Petersburg, the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim is known to be short, powerful Maimorim. However, after he came out, what happened after he came out? Lamailo, they turned the light green and said, now go and do what you have to. Reveal the secrets, reveal Chassidus as much as you want. So the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe became long, both in Kamus and in Eichus, quantity and quality, which means they were longer Maimorim B'Poyel. Not only that, but the Hesbeim, the explanations, were on a much greater level, where now every Yid that wants to can learn a Maimer Chassidus. If he learns it good enough and harvest like a piece of Gemara, he can understand it. Every person can understand it. You have to work hard sometimes, but everyone can understand it. In a Sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that Alter Rebbe was asked, what's the difference of Far Petersburg and Nach Petersburg? And Alter Rebbe himself said, he said, before Petersburg, when a Yid used to come, what?
Alter Rebbe?
Yeah. What did I say?
No.
Before Petersburg, said Alter Rebbe, when a Yid came to me to give him help, I would give him fire, and that put him in a new place, he says. But it was not so much the koyach avodasi, something like that. But after Petersburg, I worked with him so that he should himself lift himself up. Same idea. And the Alter Rebbe came out of prison. He wrote 3 letters. One letter was to the Chassidim, which is printed in Tanya. It starts off with the words "Katointi mikol Chassidim," where the Alter Rebbe explains to the Chassidim the words that Yaakov Avinu said to the Eibishter, that even though you were kind to me, in other words, because you were kind to me, Katointi, I became humbled. Because the Teva, the Alter Rebbe writes that the Teva of a person is that when he gets kindness from the Eibishter, he gets rewarded. He can become Chas v'Sholom begaiva, arrogant, and a Yid is not supposed to do that. And especially, the more kindness the Eibishter gives, the more he has to be caught in be'emav. And Alter Rebbe wanted the Chassidim should be careful with the Misnagdim, and they listened to the Alter Rebbe very carefully. The second letter was to Reb Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev, and the third letter was to Reb Baruch of Mezibush. At that time, the Alter Rebbe was very, very close to the Reb Baruch of Mezibush. Years later, I'm going to talk about that next time also, years later, in Tofresh Samach Beis. When was the Rebbe's birthday? Samach Aleph? Beis. So this is the year the Rebbe was born, a few months before the Rebbe was born. It's interesting that the Alter Rebbe made the Suda Seidor, also I think Tofresh Samach Beis. Or Samach Aleph, I don't remember.
Do you know what day of the week it was?
By the Alter Rebbe?
No.
By the Rebbe Rashab?
No, the Rebbe, you said Tofkot.
When the Rebbe was born?
Yeah.
In the Alf Nissen? I don't know.
You spoke about the Nitla.
I forgot for a second. I knew it. So the Rebbe Rashab was not in Lubavitch. He had to go to Petersburg to help out for the Klal Yisrael. And the Chassidim were very sad because a lot of Chassidim came to Lubavitch. Tofresh Samach Beis. It was 1912?
No, 1902.
1902, sorry. 1902.
It was April 18th, Friday, 1902.
Friday.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it was
still bad.
Tofresh Samach Beis was 1902, and the Rebbe Rashab was in Petersburg. So there's a whole story, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes about it. And the Chassidim was sad, they wanted to bring it's Kislev with the Rebbe Rashab. It was the Rebbe. So the Rebbe Rashab, instead of bringing, he wrote a letter from Petersburg. I made a copy of the letter, which I'll give out next time. And in there, the Rebbe Rashab wrote very sharp words that Vitas Kislev is Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. Since then, the Rebbe writes, says in Afabrengen that actually Vitas Kislev is compared to almost every yontif. Pesach, because Cherus, the Yidden came out of prison, of Mitzrayim. It's compared to Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe Rashab said it's Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. It's compared to Purim. It's compared to Chanukah. The Rebbe compares it to every single one. Shavuos is Galus of Matan Torah, and this is his Galus of Chassidus. So Yutas Kislev is a very, very special day. We'll talk about next time with Hashem. I just want to go back a little bit that when the Alter Rebbe was in Misnagid's house, according to most versions, so this Misnagid, one of the things he got the Alter Rebbe to promise him Some say it was by the second imprisonment. He told Alter Rebbe to promise him that he's going to go visit 3 of the greatest Misnagdish Gedolei Yisrael and discuss with them about Chassidus. And Alter Rebbe promised him that. Kiyaskaf, he seemingly shook hands with him. And after the prison, it's not sure when. It doesn't say anywhere clearly what year this was. But Alter Rebbe did visit these 3 Gedolei Yisrael that the Misnagid asked him to visit. The first one was called Rebbe Moshe Chayfetz. The next one was Rebbe Shua Zeitlin. And the other one was Rebbe Yoel Mi'amtzislav. And by each one of them, it was a major Kiddush Hashem, how they suddenly changed their attitude towards the Alter Rebbe. Anyway, we'll talk about that next time because it's getting late. We have to have Mariv. Shkoyach. Thank you very much, everyone.
Amen.